What's up, friends? Welcome to SPDM TV. My name is Mike, part of the SPDM crew, and I watch a lot of TV. We talk about various TV topics, reviews, and general appreciation of TV past and new. You can follow me on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Serialized at MLHilty2452 to see what all I'm watching. This week, we are talking about The Last of Us Season 2, which wrapped up not long ago. It's been a little while, so thankfully, we've had a little time to digest a little bit about what has happened, where the show is going, a lot of other stuff that we have thoughts about. So, who better to bring back for our Last of Us Season 2 discussion than our resident Last of Us game player, which is helpful for this context, general fan of the show, friend, fan, and also a friend of the podcast, John Tillyard. Welcome back. Hello. How's it going?
Hey there. It's going great. It's good to be here.
Really looking forward to this because you and I have been chatting back and forth a little bit about when are we going to get a chance to talk about this? Because I know you've got thoughts, and I'm really excited to hear about them.
Yeah, I've been dying to talk about this for a long time.
Cool. All right. So before we get into The Last of Us Season 2, let's just do a quick recap. Your experiences with the second game. So you mentioned before that the first game you really liked, you enjoyed, but you weren't exactly sure because there was some ambiguity with the fan base about whether or not the second game was actually going to be a thing. So your experiences, I'd be curious to hear what your experiences are playing the game and kind of just any general thoughts about it.
Yeah, so the first game came out in 2013, and the second game, I believe, was originally announced in 2017, and then I think it was originally planned to be released in 2019, and I think it eventually got pushed back to 2020. Yeah, definitely 2020, because I remember the irony of thinking, oh, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we're in the middle of like the zombie apocalypse in this game. So there was a lot of debates for like about 4 years after the first game came out. Is it going to get a sequel or not? Because a lot of fans saw that ending, which is the same ending as the first season of the show, thinking, oh, well, that's obviously a setup for a sequel. But there wasn't word of a sequel for a long time, and eventually it did get announced. And a lot of fans weren't so sure about whether or not that was a good idea because they liked the sort of ambiguity of that ending to the first game, and that was obviously going to take her away if you made a second game. But nonetheless, it was a massively anticipated game, probably one of the most anticipated games in recent years, really. Obviously psyched as hell for it when it came out. I know a guy that I work with, he deliberately decided to buy the slightly more expensive digital version just so he could download it a couple of days before it came out, so that midnight on the day of its release, he could just grab his controller and start playing. Because that is what you have to do now with modern games. You've got to install them and you've got to download them and everything. I didn't go that route. I just ordered a physical copy off Amazon, and then I was working that day, so I had to wait until the evening before I actually got a chance.
That's got to be the worst.
But yeah, just marathoning it that day, and then basically just like binged it as quickly as I could, like over that first like weekend, because obviously I was quite scared about spoilers, because actually there was a lot of spoilers released even before the game came out. There was this huge article about it, like that apparently gave away a lot of like big plot points or something. So I was desperate to get through it as quickly as I could. And looking back on it, I'm not quite sure how I got through it as quickly as I did, because it's actually quite a long game. But I do remember thinking it was a great experience. I remember it having one of the most integral storylines I think I've ever experienced with a game. You know, like when you're at the end of it, you're not really sort of thinking about it as a game, you know, what worked as a game, what was good gameplay, what was good sequences. You were just thinking about the story and everything that happened in it. Some things which I can talk about on here, some things I cannot, because we're only halfway through the game at this point with the show. But I do remember just really admiring just how engrossing the story was for a game, and just really enjoying that about it. And also a lot of other like interesting details about it, like the realistic physics they had with a lot of things. And another thing which I was going to be interested to see how they did this in the show actually is there's quite a good mechanic they have with the enemies, which is like you can hear them sort of saying things like, where's Drake right now? Is he over on the other side? Oh, there he is. You know, where have you got to? You know, are you messing about with your dog or something? So like they sound like actual people. And if you kill one of them, like stealth wise, and they find their body, they're like, Drake's dead. Oh my God, guys, what are we going to do? It's like, and you can hear them sort of muttering to themselves, oh God, whoever's killed Drake, I'm going to get them. You know, so they feel like actual just people. They're not just things you have to kill.
Right.
Real kind of interesting detail, which I was going to be interested to see how they incorporated that into the show. And it was just a really sort of engrossing kind of game. A lot of it was kind of quite a polarizing game in terms of how the fans felt about it. A lot of aspects of it that they really didn't like. I think one particular thing was very sort of obviously controversial. But yeah, I remember just really admiring the story of it, and the gameplay obviously is great as well. But it was the story really that sold it for me. It's not quite up there with the first game for me. I think the first game's like one of the best games I've ever played. This is pretty good, but it's not quite up there. I don't absolutely love it, but it's a very good game overall and an amazing story, I think.
Nice. And amazing story for a video game. I think that to me matters a lot more than some of the gameplay aspects, which I feel like for certain stories, I just enjoy, like if it has a little bit of everything in it, I'm all here for it. But the one consistent thing that I have heard about the Last of Us Part 2 is that it is a long game.
Yeah, very long.
Which to me, I had concerns about that going forward because I was like, how are they going to get this all in one season? And I figured out pretty quick because after our conversations and after kind of just seeing the episode count, it's like, oh, they're not going to get this done in one season. So let's segue into The Last of Us Season 2, which just wrapped up. John, I want to hear just some general thoughts at first. What did you think? Let's use our good old handy sip pop scale. Did you like it, love it, hate it, dislike it, or did you think it was just okay?
I've been switching back and forth between liked it, even high side of liked it, and loved it. I think I'm going to settle on high side of liked it. There are a few sort of decisions they made about adapting this that I'm not massively on board with. I think it just doesn't quite reach top tier for me.
Yeah, I'm right there, if not slightly lower. I'm on like straight down the middle, liked it. And I think the reason why is because for the episode count that we got, 7 episodes, which feels very weird for an HBO show, I have some character questions that I am kind of wondering about, and it's not character motivations or anything like that. It's just lack of screen time and just lack of development for certain characters that seem integral to the plot, but yet don't seem to really get a whole lot of due. So, all right, should we just rip the Band-Aid off right now? And should we just talk about, perhaps the most important episode of the season, perhaps the most important episode of the show, which is what happened to Shimmer? No, I'm just kidding. Let's.
Funny you mentioned that actually, because Shimmer dies in the game.
What? Oh man, this changes everything.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's start with that second episode, the one where Joel he doesn't just die; he's brutally murdered by Abby, and I guess you could say her crew as well, because they just sat around and just let her do her thing. And unfortunately, Ellie gets there right on time to witness the killing blow. But also in that episode, there is also a giant zombie like attack on the town as well. So, John, where do you want to start with that second episode? Which one would you rather talk about first?
I'd rather talk about Joel's death, to be honest.
Okay.
Because the siege of Jackson is not in the game.
I have heard about that it's not in the game. Is it alluded to in the game, or
no, nothing like that at all?
So this is just something brand new to
entirely
amp up the action. Okay,
I guess so. I think there was a bit of criticism, I think, of the first season. There wasn't enough like zombie action or something. So maybe that's a response to that or something. I'm not sure.
Isn't that always the criticism with any zombie related things? It's like, hey, we don't care about things like the people, or like all we want is let's just kill some zombies. And like, no, I want actual story, believe it or not. So, all right, let's talk about Joel's death. So, John, I'll cede the floor to you. Just give me some general thoughts on what you thought of that sequence. How does it compare to the game, and any issues or anything that it sounds weird to say that you enjoyed about it, but anything that you thought was well done?
Well, yeah, I thought it would be a little bit easier to sit through knowing what was going to happen, but actually I think it made it a little bit more painful watching him save Abby's life, and then them looking over the horizon and looking at Jackson and thinking, oh, go back to Jackson. Come on, Joel, go back to Jackson and help them. but Abby's saying, "Oh no, we're only a few feet away. We're only a few miles away, or something."
Mm-hmm.
And then them taking the horse back to Abby's location, and I'm just watching this, knowing what's going to happen to Joel, and I'm just like, "Oh my god, I can't stand this." But yeah, it's just as brutal in the game. The way that it happens actually is it's slightly different. It's Tommy that is with Joel in the game rather than Dina.
Okay.
And the other thing that actually makes it kind of a more interesting experience is actually you play as Abby during that part. You are fighting against this horde of zombies, and then like right when it looks like they're about to get you as Abby, Joel shows up and saves your life. And it's quite sort of interesting, like the way that Joel just sort of comes out of nowhere, both in the game and in the show. You're not quite sure where he comes from and how that happens, and how he just happens to discover her like that. And it's not even really clear exactly why he makes the decision to save her life like that. I mean, he doesn't know her. I think, in this kind of dystopian environment, you're thinking maybe that's just another mouth to feed, I would have thought. But no, I guess Joel's got a little bit of compassion in him at this point, and it's done him in ultimately.
No, right.
But the other interesting change actually they make is in the game, Tommy, that is the one that's with Joel, basically just for some reason just says to Abby, "I'm Tommy and this is my brother Joel." And you can see Abby just sort of like have this kind of reaction of like, "Oh shit, that's Joel." And in the game, you actually don't know who Abby is at that point. You don't even know that she knows who Joel is, and you certainly don't know that she wants to kill him. So it's kind of an interesting kind of like, what was that about sort of moment where you're not quite sure. You don't even really know why you're playing as Abby, and you obviously have no idea that Abby knows who Joel is. That name has significance to her. So it's quite a sort of interesting kind of experience in the game. Whereas in the show, you're very much up to speed. And I also kind of like the fact that the way that Abby figures out that that's Joel is she just hears Dina saying, "Come over here, Joel," or something like that, and she's like, "Oh, that's Joel."
That's the Joel.
You're much more up to speed in the show as to what's really going on, and it feels like it makes a lot more sense that she would just figure out that was Joel from just overhearing his name. And then what that kind of doesn't work in the show's favor, I think, is that makes the moment where Abby basically gets the golf club and the shotgun first and shoots Joel in the leg. It's a much more shocking moment in the game because before that happens, you have no idea that Abby wants to kill Joel, and she just suddenly gets the shotgun out and shoots him, and you're like, "What the hell? He saved your life."
Right.
So it's not as shocking in the show, but it's still like pretty brutal to watch. Knowing that what is Abby about to do, and I suppose it's kind of toying with your expectations because I don't know about you, not knowing what happens. Were you thinking Joel was going to survive? Were you thinking he's going to be okay?
Yeah, because I don't know if you know this, John, but Joel's a main character, and main characters usually
you're thinking he'd be okay.
Main characters usually get plot armor of some type, but this is HBO where anybody is fair game. And also, I think for me, the biggest thing was that, boy, this is the second episode and they're doing this now. This felt a little bit more like, this feels a little bit more like a season finale type of thing. But I'm actually kind of glad that they did it now to avoid it getting leaked or spoiled as well.
Yes, that was the feeling, I think, with the game, because to be honest, I'm surprised Joel didn't die in the first episode of this season, actually, because it's really early on in the game that he dies. It's like maybe like an hour or an hour and a half of gameplay into the game, bearing in mind like the game's like 15 hours or so.
Right.
That he dies. And I think they did that for the same reason. They didn't want people leaking it online through like Let's Plays or something that Joel dies, that they knew like, people would play that part where Joel dies probably on opening night, or opening day of the game coming out.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm quite surprised it wasn't in the first episode because it is so early on in the game. And I've lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So early on in the game,
yeah,
there,
you also like you don't get Abby's backstory like right up front like you do in the show. That comes much later. So again, you have no idea who Abby is, or that she knows who Joel is, and certainly you don't know that she wants to kill him. And so it makes that moment, I think, a lot more shocking. And I think the real impact of that moment in the show is kind of lost because it's not a surprise. So I guess they felt like maybe the real shock would come just from the fact that Joel does actually die, which you certainly are not expecting. But it's something that also kind of needs to happen because it is integral to the plot of
Mhm.
the game
Yeah.
and obviously of the show as well.
So that whole sequence was just really rough to watch because is Ellie there at all during the game?
Ellie shows up just before Joel is killed. Basically,
Okay.
it's like one of the most like replayed reaction. It's like kind of like a gaming version of the Red Wedding. I think the
Ah,
people reacting to the moment where Ellie basically is just lying on the floor and she's yelling at Joel, "Get up, fucking get up!" And Abby, I think, like just whacks him again with the golf club just to kill him, basically his final sort of blow. And then Abby just sort of, Ellie even just sort of lets rip on Abby. You're gonna fucking die.
what
How could
she
you do?
Yeah. So a couple thoughts about this is that yeah, I like performance wise, everybody is doing phenomenal job. Like I really felt that Bella Ramsey is just taking it up a notch and she just does everything that she can to, give the proper due to this moment. So I appreciate that. I also did want to give a shout out to Caitlin Deaver because one of like when I heard that they were casting Caitlin Deaver, I was like, really? Like she looks the part and she's a great actress, but I personally have not seen her in a whole lot of action stuff. So I was like, can you pull this off? And she did. So I really thought that that was great. I thought the cinematography was really great. The music was outstanding. It really underscores the gravity of the situation where we are losing another beloved Pedro Pascal character in very short order, kind of similar. You mentioned Game of Thrones, like his Oberyn Martell character is still one of those characters that is still beloved, and people are still feeling the sting of that head explosion and can't believe that.
Awful that scene, yeah.
Yeah, so Pedro Pascal and HBO just can't catch a break
Yeah. He
right
just
now.
has to die brutally every time, doesn't he?
Eh, right. I am glad that they did it early. That sounds so shitty and cynical to say, but I'm glad that they did it early because I would not have want to been spoiled about that. And it's interesting that you say from a gaming perspective that you this comes as a total shock. And it sucks because I think it would have been cool if they would have tried to do something like that, but
Yeah,
there's no way to get around that. You have to give Abby a little bit more of a backstory in order for people to understand what's going on. It's much harder to do that in a TV or a movie format when in the video game you could play as the character,
yeah.
whereas you're
I'm
seeing.
just about to say, yeah.
wh-
Because in the game, you just suddenly start playing as Abby. There's no real indication as to exactly why you're playing as Abby, but I think that's a good like indicator in the game to like, okay, this is a significant character that's going to have some kind of important role in the story because you're
Mhm.
playing as her. Whereas in a show or a TV show, you're not going to get that across without that element. I should also say another interesting change is in the game, Abby, as far as we're aware from what we actually see, Abby does not torment Joel by saying, "You killed my father," before she kills him. I mean, if she does say that to him before he dies, we don't see it in the game. You actually don't find that out until much later. Like the whole scene that you see in the first episode with Abby, that actually comes after the scene at the very end of this season. So it's interesting the
I'm
way they've moved a few things around.
curious from your perspective, do you think that that was the right choice of the show to do, to show that scene right off the bat of Joel killing Abby's dad, as opposed to maybe showing that a little bit later? Or do you think that would be too clunky and be like, what is the deal with this girl? Why does she want to kill Joel?
It's a difficult one because when you see it in the game, obviously, it's after the cut to black that you see at the end of this season where Abby's at the theater, and then you immediately go into that scene with Abby where you learn who her father is and that Joel killed her. Obviously, there's a break between seasons with this show, so they would have had to wait like another 2 years if they were going to move it to where it is in the game. So, from that sense, I kind of understand it because you don't want people waiting like the full 2 years to find out Abby's backstory. And I actually think maybe they could have moved it to maybe just later in the season, maybe not the end of the season, but maybe move it to later because it is a great moment in the game where you are a bit sort of like, oh, that's why she wanted to kill Joel, and suddenly it's a lot more understandable. It makes a lot more sense. You hate Abby up to this point in the game for killing Joel, and
Mhm.
you're really like rooting for Ellie. Like yeah, go kill Abby, and now suddenly, like halfway through the game, you're like, oh,
Oh, I get it.
right.
That makes sense why she would do something like that. It's interesting that you say also that Tommy was there and how, I don't know, I think that would have changed the calculus of the whole scene a little bit more if Tommy was there too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it would have given the scene a little bit more stakes, I guess, because if Joel or if he and Ellie were there to be, to experience this,
I
that
think Tommy's unconscious when Joel dies in the
oh,
game.
kind of similar to what happens with
It's
Dina.
similar to Dina, yeah.
So where is Dina during this whole
Dina
sequence in the game?
was Dina was in the same role that Jesse is in the game. She even
The
is with Ellie smoking crack, basically, or
cool
pot. And I
fact.
don't know where Jesse is in the game. I guess he's back in Jackson.
I mean, it's not like it matters at the end of the day because we all know what happens to Jesse,
Yeah.
but Tommy is in Jackson with this approaching horde of what do they call them? Like
Infected, I think, is the
and
most common
they
word.
just
There's
yeah.
lots of different types of them. Like you've got clickers and you've got runners, I think, and the big ones are called bloaters. I'm trying to remember what the name of that one that nearly kills Tommy in the show. I think it has a name and
Yeah.
so many different types.
So I thought the sequence where Abby comes across all of these frozen or like under snow infected, I thought that looked really cool. And then
Yeah.
you juxtapose that with at the beginning, like during the first episode, you see that Ellie is kind of discovering that some of these infected, they're like getting smarter and
Yes.
they're formulating things like strategy and trying to be a little bit more mindful of certain things, which to me that's interesting. That's something that for me the walking like shows like The Walking Dead or other zombie shows kind of lack a little bit is that all of these zombies, they're just the same thing over and over and over again, and that's really it. When you see a little bit of the evolution of some of these infected, that's fascinating because that comes into play a little bit later on. So one thing that I know I appreciated about kind of the beginning of this episode is, Abby discovering this giant horde of zombies. They start to rise up, I suppose, thaw out or whatever you want to call it. And
Yeah.
then they start running towards Jackson Hole. And the way that Abby is like crawling away under that fence, it gave me claustrophobia because I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's terrifying. But
That bit is in the game as well.
yeah, and
It feels the same way.
yeah, and the way that Joel like kind of rescues her and that felt organic. That felt like, oh, okay, that's cool. But there's also a sense of, oh shit, like when is she going to figure out that this is the Joel, the Joel that she has been searching for? And always the question when it comes to revenge stories is that, okay, you've accomplished what you set out to accomplish. Now what? Do you feel any better? Do you have your dad back? No. So, and it seems like this also has a very big effect on the rest of her crew as well, because some of them just feel like things have changed. Some of them like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm still just going to be an asshole about stuff. So that's
Yeah,
that's fine.
you will definitely see that in the next season. A lot of that.
Anything else about Joel's death before we move on to other parts of the season?
I should just say that Stalkers is the other name of the infected that I was looking for. It's like actually one of the most frustrating enemies in the game is because they're smart, and they're very fast as well. So I'm glad they put them in the show as well because it's different types of the infected. Really gives like a good variety to the conflict. The other thing I did find interesting about Joel's death was the fact that they had this siege of Jackson going on at the same time, and I think they put that in there maybe more for the sake of the next episode that followed it, where Ellie is campaigning for them to go out there and kill Abby, and maybe that's there for a justification to say,
No.
we've got all these infected attacking Jackson, we can't lose all these people. But I think the other problem with that for me is it's too much for one episode. I think it's just way too much sort of like harrowing stuff happening. You got this huge siege of Jackson where it's basically, you can see over the horizon like it's up in flames and anything, and then you've also got Joel dying. It's like it felt like it was a bit too much, and I wonder if maybe it might have been an idea to have the Siege of Jackson like a little bit earlier, like maybe the first episode. If you're not going to have Joel die in the first episode, maybe have it there, and then just maybe show a little bit of like the fallout from that siege and like how they're really struggling now. Something so that was an interesting choice. I thought to have like both of those things in that episode. It was a lot.
So I would have to agree with you. I think that either you kill, so you have Joel, so you could do it one of two ways. One, you can have Joel at the end, like get killed in episode one, but as he's looking out at Jackson Hole, it's on fire, and then it's like, oh, what's going on there? And then the second episode, you kind of focus a little bit more on that. Or you have the siege of Jackson Hole happening during the first episode, but you're taking away some, not like vital backstory, but at least some things that happen. Like you introduce Dina into the mix. You introduce like what's going on in Jackson Hole. We get the sequence where Ellie, like you get to see some things like Ellie and Joel are like estranged at this point. Their relationship, like it just doesn't exist anymore. So you see a little bit more of that. But if you have the siege in the first episode, and then it ends with Joel just looking out and be like, "Hey, we gotta go help them," and then from there be like, "Oh, we're gonna dedicate the whole second episode to everything that happened with Joel to get him to that point, and then have him die at the end." I don't know. From a story structure, it did feel like a lot. It feels also like a plot device just to get Tommy away from that whole situation with Joel, and have him focus a little bit more on what's going on in Jackson. So
I definitely felt like they wanted to give Tommy something to do.
Yes,
that's the main thing I was thinking.
Well, because in reality, Tommy does this, and then he's absent for pretty much a large chunk of the middle episodes of this season.
Yeah. And it's weird, actually, because he does play a larger role in the game, actually. He, I think after Joel dies, he is the one that leaves Jackson first to try and track down Abby.
Oh, so it's not Ellie and Dina that go first.
Yes. I think Ellie does not have to like have medical attention for months after Joel dies either in the game. I can't quite remember. I don't think that happens in the game. I think it's pretty much right after Joel dies that Tommy sort of like is campaigning alongside Ellie for them to go and kill Abby, basically.
Yeah. With that all being said, I thought the sequence, like this whole siege of Jackson Hole, I thought it was cool, but just because I thought it was cool doesn't mean I thought it was plot relevant, or I thought that like it felt like they added that in because they knew that there wasn't going to be a whole lot of action this season. So let's go ahead and give the casual fans, not, the ones that are just looking like, oh, this is a show about the zombie apocalypse and blah, blah, blah. You're giving that to them and sacrificing a little bit of like stuff in the game. And I'm not sure if I agree with that, with that decision making, because at the end of the day, you're right. It takes away a little bit from what's going on with Joel. And I think that just kind of does a disservice to that. But it just, I don't know. I feel like more action is coming after the events of what happens towards the latter half of the season in Seattle. But before we get to anything in Seattle, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we get into like other parts of the season where they're actually leaving Jackson Hole?
So like the first 3 episodes?
Yeah, let's say the first 3 episodes.
Well, I did think like it was going to be kind of weird with the siege on Jackson, like knowing that this isn't in the game and therefore it's probably not going to matter in the grand scheme of things. So seeing like it's on fire basically, and it's not going to matter. It's like that's so weird, the sort of thing. But the sort of council session that they have in the next episode is also not in the game, and I think maybe that's more of kind of reaction to the siege on Jackson. It's like, what do we do from here? Joel's also died, and I think maybe that's in more of kind of a better justification for why they would not just sort of send some other soldiers out there to help Ellie. So there's no like sort of question about Ellie, gathering up help other than maybe Tommy and Dina to go and kill Joel. She's pretty go and kill Joel, go and kill Abby. Sorry, she's pretty adamant that she has to go out there on her own. So that's an interesting change. And the party scene is pretty much exactly the same as it is in the game. It's because it's a cutscene, so the way it's shot and the dialogue and everything, it's all the same. But interestingly, the homophobic guy that is annoyed about them kissing, that's I think pretty much his only scene in the game. He doesn't like have a little redemption where he helps them.
He helps them escape. Yeah,
helps them escape. So I thought that was maybe kind of nice to maybe show, okay, he's a dick, but he also has like a nicer side to him. Maybe he also valued Joel as a person and sort of thought he wanted to help out, like this revenge sort of plot. So yeah, some interesting changes from the game that definitely sort of slow down the pace a little bit, but they feel like the kinds of things that maybe they wanted to add to the game, but they thought it would like slow down the gameplay a little bit, because obviously like that whole counseling thing, that's not really something that translates well to a game, I don't think so.
No.
I thought that was interesting. And I think it's also maybe like a response to maybe like criticism that's maybe been about the game about why would Ellie just go out on her own to kill Abby? Why would she not at least try and get help, perhaps?
I'm sure. However, trauma makes people do irrational things. And, when you're filled with such rage and anger, yeah, it's understandable why you'd go out there alone. Because one thing that I want to talk about is Dina. So Dina is an interesting wrinkle for me as a character because, first of all, Isabel Merced, or like however you pronounce it, man, she's having a hell of a year so far. So I found Dina to be a fascinating character because just her dynamic with Ellie and even her dynamic with like Jesse as well was really interesting. But the way that what she's doing to like kind of protect Ellie and kind of during the third episode, one thing that she said as soon as like Ellie is like quote released from the hospital, she said, "So I lied. I know exactly who, like I know names, I know where they're headed, I know all of that," which is interesting because like how knocked out were you again, or when did you hear all of this? But
Yeah.
I think the way that she's trying to like protect Ellie and the way that she calls Ellie out on some of her bullshit as well, which is like, hey, you want to get revenge, but do you have a plan? Do you know what you're packing? Do you know where you're going? I thought that creates like a really relevant way for her to like actually be a good tag along other than, hey, I just want to come with you because I like you, which I think their relationship dynamic is fascinating, and I'm kind of curious to see what happens in light of Jesse dying at the end of this season, which, boy, talk about a kick in the nuts. Hey, I didn't want to leave Jackson, but I came after you because I thought that, you needed help. Oh, my ex-girlfriend who I impregnated, great. And then I'm gonna die for this mission. Jesse, man, sorry. That's real shitty for you, man. But yeah, I really like Dina as a character. I think that she's tough, she's resourceful, she's oddly quirky and funny as well. The fact that she's pregnant, I don't know what to do with that right now because I always get a little uneasy. It's like, okay, you're pregnant during a zombie apocalypse. Like, dude, like how is this going to be a thing? Like, because I've seen enough zombie apocalypse stories where it's like you're pregnant and something goes wrong. So I'm super concerned about that. But I loved Ellie's reaction once she finds out as well. She's like, so we're gonna be a family. It's like, oh,
I'm going to be a dad.
yeah, that's cute. I love that. So I get curious, general thoughts on what you thought of Dina as a character and kind of like how is Dina in the show versus how is Dina in the game?
Yeah, I agree. Isabella Merced, probably the MVP of this season. I thought she was outstanding the whole way through. And it's interesting, actually, they kind of turned Dina's character into more what Ellie is in the game. She's kind of, like you were saying, she was like the quirky one, like leading the way and like being kind of like the mentor. That's kind of more what Ellie does actually in the game. She's kind of the one like leading the whole thing.
Okay.
And Dina's kind of like just along the way, kind of just trying to sort of like be sensible about the situation. And like there's a couple of times I think in the game where she's trying to encourage Ellie to like loot for supplies or something, which is not really something you can put in the show. And she is pregnant in the game as well. But it's interesting that you talk about like the problems with her being pregnant. which are not really addressed in the show because it's a big deal in the game. Ellie is like, why didn't you tell me? This is like kind of a problem for us. And there's quite a famous bit of dialogue, which is where Dina says to her, well, I didn't want to be a burden. And Ellie's like, well, you're a fucking burden now. So yeah, the I'm going to be a dad line is not in the game. So yeah, that was kind of an interesting sort of change that they made. And, they have made Dina into kind of a more sort of resourceful and kind of to the point kind of character, sort of like leading everything and basically being the leader in motivating Ellie to go and kill Abby, which again is not something that's in the game. And I kind of like that gives her a bit more of a role in the show. Because I actually think in the game even Dina has more of a kind of role of just sort of guiding the player, like giving you hints as to what to do in order to progress. And in terms of her role in the story, she's more just kind of there to just like go along with what Ellie is doing. So they definitely try to make her into a slightly stronger character, which is maybe why they also have her be with Joel when he dies. It maybe like reinforces that sort of like that this meant something to her as well, Joel dying. And she is pregnant, and yet she still wants to like help Ellie with this, even though it puts her even more of a risk. And I actually sort of kind of in two minds about whether or not I like the fact that in the show Ellie is more like just pleased about that, because again it's a problem, but it also sort of shows that Ellie sort of like still values her and is still like happy about the fact that they're going to be a family. So it sort of shows that Ellie maybe a bit more sort of cares about Dina in a way. And it does sort of make me wonder though, because this is in the game as well, why Ellie does not tell Dina that she's immune, because she seems like the sort of person that she should tell, really, because she is basically like a romantic partner. She's one of the few people that actually should know that sort of thing, and that is a big sort of conflict in the game as well when Dina finds that out. So yeah, I like that they have sort of strengthened Dina's character from what she is in the game, and I think she's a much stronger character in it, and her relationship with Ellie is much stronger as well.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked a little bit about the first three episodes. Let's kind of move on as they leave Jackson Hole and we're on our way to Seattle. And I'll let you pick where you want to go next in terms of our discussion. What, like, from the second part of this season, what's something that you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about, Seattle? Do you want to talk about these two competing factions? Do you want to talk about Jeffrey Wright's very obvious lack of screen time, but I hope that he gets something more to do in the next season?
Yes, I think he will, definitely. Yeah, let's talk about Fedra. Yeah,
okay, because I only know two things about him. Three, if you include that I love Jeffrey Wright. So giving Jeffrey Wright more to do is always A-okay with me, because correct me if I'm wrong, did I hear correctly that he is also the voice in the game?
Yes, he's reprising his role from the game in this.
Well, that's awesome. I'm glad to see that. So I only know two things about him. Is that one, he betrayed his own squad in order to join up with the Wolf or the WLF.
WLF, yeah.
So, and he's very good at torturing people.
Yes.
That's all I know. But what else can you tell me about Fedra? And just give me some thoughts on the two scenes that he's in, and any thoughts about that.
Yeah, so I think most of what we learn about Fedra and the WLF is in the part that the part of the game that the show has not got to yet. So I think most of what we're seeing in the second season about Fedra and WLF is just explored in notes that you find as you're playing as Ellie.
Okay.
Which obviously would not translate well to a show you, so that they're showing it to you. So I like that they've taken like something that's just sort of like you're told about in the game, and now you can actually sort of see it. I also like the look of Seattle that they've got here. In fact, there's a lot of scenes here where they have basically taken the environment of the game and they've just copied and pasted it into the show, and it looks the part like perfectly. The infected as well. They all look great, and I really do sort of feel like Jeffrey Wright's character actually feels like even more unlikable in this than he does in the game, because you're experiencing what he's doing like firsthand, whereas you kind of just sort of not really sort of like you're hearing about it through the notes, and then you kind of like just sort of witnessing it, but not really sure like if it really affects you when you see it in the game. So I definitely feel like you grow to dislike his character a lot more in this. It is kind of weird that all this is happening like without Abby being present, because I definitely get the feeling like they're trying to like not have Abby here as much, because you're going to see what she was up to at this point in the timeline, like next season, I'm pretty sure. So they probably felt a bit sort of tied down by the way that the game is structured in that sense, with like having these scenes with Jeffrey Wright's character and the WLF, and it all has to happen without Abby, basically. Yeah. But you're told about what she's doing. So it felt a little bit clunky in that sense, but I definitely feel like they do a good job, like making his character like really unlikable, and you're like sort of like, this is not a good character, and you're really sort of like hoping that something bad is going to happen to him. So it's well set up, I think.
I would have to agree with that. But his development kind of represents kind of like a broader problem with the whole season, is that you've got all of these pockets of people with a lack of development, and it just makes me wonder a little bit. It's like, why couldn't we have like an 8th, 9th, or 10th episode of this season to kind of expand a little bit more on some of these things? Because the lack of character development and lack of screen time with Abby, Fedra.
I think the lack of Abby is very deliberate because of the way the story is structured, because we're going to get basically all Abby, I think. Yeah.
Which I hear from a lot of people is like, I don't want to see Abby as a character, Abby bad. And like, dude, there's so much more context that we don't know about. So like, cool it, man. Like, let's just wait to see what they have, because the crew for the show has at least given us enough so far. Like, they could tell this story with grace, and I'm looking forward to that. But not a whole lot of development there, and there's really not a whole lot there with this other faction in Seattle. I believe they're called the Seraphites. Am I saying that right?
Scars, okay. I think is what they typically call them.
So, but it is this like culty religious group.
Yeah.
All I know about them is that, hey, if the WLF is bad, how do I classify these people who disembowel people, and they?
Yeah, they're pretty bad as well.
They're pretty bad as well. So what am I supposed to do with that? And also, we're not following anyone from this particular group. There's only one person that we followed a little bit, and Jeffrey Wright tortured this guy with hot water. Like, dude, why? Oh, that made me so uncomfortable watching that scene. But it was intentional and deliberate, I'm sure, to be like, definitely. Dude, you're not a good person. But all of this to say, I feel like I know nothing about all of these different groups and why they're fighting. Are they fighting for the soul of Seattle? Are they fighting because, like, I don't know. Like, what can you tell me about this that will provide some clarity and context?
So, from what I can remember, I don't think the Scars are introduced this early in the game. I don't think it's until the Abby section that you're actually introduced to them, and you're introduced to a very specific character, or two characters, excuse me, when you are introduced to them through Abby. And those two characters have not been introduced in the show, so they are just kind of introducing this group and just telling us that they're bad, or that there are bad people in it, at least, so that we kind of know that they're a bad group and that we don't really like them. And then we'll probably be introduced to them again when they tell the Abby part of the story. And I can't go into like exactly what's going to happen there, but we're going to get kind of a different sort of side of it with two specific characters, I think. Okay. When we meet them there. So it's odd, really, because they're kind of just sort of like setting up the fact that they're there and that we don't really like them and we don't really know anything else about them other than that. And the fact that, we've got this gap between seasons without getting that kind of key bit of information where it's going to make a bit more sense is kind of odd in a way. It's interesting that they're setting these kinds of things up before they really make a lot of sense and before like their role in the story is going to make any kind of sense to people that haven't played the game. So it's an interesting one. But basically all of these groups are bad. I think there's actually a point like towards the end of the game where I think Ellie basically just sort of says WLF, Scars, fuck all of these groups, basically, like nobody's good in this world.
Right. And speaking of that, I'm kind of curious because I'd love to get your thoughts on what you thought of the Joel and Ellie centric episode, because thankfully, as Joel is dead at the game, or in the game and in the show, at this point, it's like is this the last that we're going to see of Pedro Pascal?
Yes,
And
I think they're pretty much done with Joel now. I think pretty much every part of the game that he is in has been shown now.
okay, so I'm curious, what did you think of that Joel and Ellie centric episode where it kind of shows just how they were originally and how it got to the point where their relationship is like kind of repaired, but I'm curious what you thought of that episode in general.
So this is the part that I've been dying to talk about. I've got
Oh,
so many thoughts about this.
all right, let's
Yeah,
do it.
I thought they adapted the flashback scenes pretty well. They're told sort of like in a sort of staggered way through the first half of the game. You don't get them one after the other in the game. You get them at like different points, but they adapted them like really well. I think like giving you kind of an idea that they had quite a good relationship, like right after the events of the first game, and then gradually as doubt started to enter Ellie's mind a lot more, they kind of drifted apart. I like the additional scene with Gail's husband, which is not in the game at all, because Gail is not in the game. Because I think it does a good job of like convincing Ellie that Joel is just a compulsive liar and that he will just lie just to save his own skin or make himself look better. And it also like enforces the idea that Ellie's a much more good-natured and morally righteous sort of person and will just do the right thing. And she went ahead and told Gail the truth after all that happened. It actually kind of reminded me of the character of Homelander from The Boys, the way that Joel just sort of makes himself sort of look good with his little story at the end there about Gail's husband. And I was actually quite glad to see Ellie just come out with the actual truth of what happened. That, I think, is like replacing a scene from the game where they actually go back to the Fireflies location and Ellie sees all this kind of information about the testing that they were doing, like before, like Joel killed everyone. And she sort of like cottons on to the fact that like this does not add up to what Joel told me. And in the game, that is where Joel tells her the truth. It's not the porch scene where Joel actually tells her the truth. So she basically just sort of says to Joel, stop lying to me. Will you tell me the truth? And I remember actually being really gripped by that scene when I was playing it for the first time, because Joel has like a long pause of like, it's got to be close to a minute where he can't bring himself to tell her the truth. And eventually he just comes out like really tearfully, like, they were going to kill you, so I stopped it. And then the porch scene where obviously Ellie in the game already knows the truth. I think that takes place maybe about a year and a half later. And so by that point, Ellie has sort of come to accept the fact that Joel lied to her. And she just says to Joel at that point, I'm not sure I can forgive you, but I'd like to try, which is the key, really, I think, to everything that happens in the course of the story in the game and also in the show. Mm-hmm. So I find it interesting, actually, though, that they have moved that scene forward from where it is in the game, because in the game, it's like one of the very last things that you see. It's like practically the very end. And it's kind of an interesting thing because I can't really talk about what happens right after you've seen that scene, but it really has a lot more of an impact of like, oh, right, so that's why this and that and everything. I can't say exactly what I'm talking, what that has to connect with here, but it really like hits you a lot more of like, suddenly things make a lot more sense as to why Ellie would do certain things. Like I am glad that they put it here in the show because, they're wrapping up Joel basically. And I think it just makes much more sense to have like a flashback scene, like right at the point where you're coming to terms with the fact that Joel has died and, you're moving on to the next point of like going to kill Abby. But I think it also like helps you to better understand like really where Ellie's motivation for killing Abby, what the core, the key point of that was, which was basically the fact that Joel's lied to me, but I'm going to begin this process of trying to forgive him, and then Abby just kills him. Mm-hmm. And she feels like in her mind, Abby has robbed her of the opportunity to forgive Joel. And so she's thinking, okay, I can't get closure from forgiving Joel, but I can get closure from killing Abby. Right. That is at least what she's thinking. I don't know if we agree with her about that. I'm guessing not.
Yeah, probably not. But I was fascinated by this episode in a lot of ways. I think the way that they structured it, it centers around, like Abby's birthday, or not Abby, Ellie's birthday, as a way that like Joel is trying to, talk with her and trying to, kind of just remember what it's like to be a dad under normal circumstances.
Actually, that scene in the museum was actually even better in the show than it is in the game, and it's a great scene in the game as well.
I was going to ask you that if that was in the game, because that was one of my favorite parts of the episode. I really felt for Joel and Ellie during that time. It's like, oh, they're going to be all good. I didn't like. I struggled a little bit with Joel, telling Ellie things like, "Hey, like you liking girls is just a phase," but that's how some dads react to things like that. But Joel going through like stages of if you go through like normal development for a teenager, there's going to be a bit of a rebellion phase. And between, Ellie come to terms with the fact that she likes girls, the quote unquote drug use, the tattoos, different things like that. I thought it was interesting the way that it changed up the dynamic with their relationship and how that eventually leads her to be like, look, I need my own space, man. Can I move into the garage? Or I'm moving into the garage. So
Yeah,
I I thought that was interesting to see. But the scene that you were talking about with Gail's husband, I was that's one of those scenes that I was just not expecting to like it as much as I did, because it just shows a lot about everyone's character during this time frame where Joel's main job and responsibility is to protect the people of Jackson Hole. And if someone's infected, what are you going to do? You have to kill them so that nobody could do that. And Ellie doesn't get that yet because she's just starting to go on patrols. She's starting to do that. And also not a whole lot of context because she's immune from everything. So she doesn't understand the implications of what that means for certain people to have to lose somebody with
yeah.
that. Catherine O'Hara was like it's almost a thankless role that she gets during this season where you're not exactly sure how Joel killed her husband, but when you see it, it's like, oh, that's shitty. That's real shitty, especially since he said that I would take you back because he promise Ellie that, or not promise, but like,
Yes, I think he promised her, yeah, and then he just did it anyway.
yeah. I
It's definitely painting Joel in a clear sort of unlikable kind of role that I don't think you really see at any point in either of the games.
Yeah. So I enjoyed this episode, and if this is the swan song for Pedro Pascal with The Last of Us, officially wrapping this up and him moving on to his other Disney ventures where he's going to be the Mandalorian and he's going to be Mr. Fantastic, fine, so be it.
A big year for him.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So we wrap that up, and then I'll kick it to you. What was there anything else from this episode that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, the porch scene has fascinated me for a long time. I can't talk about everything that it connects to because that comes at the end of the game. But I do kind of find it interesting that obviously you've got Ellie saying, "I would like to try and forgive you," right after she's found out the truth, which I guess is kind of just like what they had to do when you incorporate the finding out the truth scene with the porch scene as it is in the game. And I'm not sure if I really buy that she would like immediately make that decision as opposed
Mhm.
to like in the game where she makes that decision like a year or so later. But it sort of like gives you a bit more of an air of like she's quite determined to like get this kind of closure and maybe go back to a relationship with Joel that's more like normal sort of father daughter sort of stuff. But having seen that scene with Gail's husband, that kind of like reinforces the idea that Joel has lied to her, he's lied to Gail, he's probably going to carry on lying. It kind of makes me wonder a little bit more like, why do you want to forgive him though? Like, why would you not want to just maybe like find somebody else to be a father? I mean, here's the thing: he's not actually her father, so she could just kind of find somebody else to latch onto, like being like a parental figure. But at the end of the day, I suppose there's also the fact that Joel did actually save her life in what she was doing there. So she's maybe kind of in two minds. Like he had good intentions in a sense. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. My life kind of can still matter, even though it didn't matter in that particular context. Like that's the other sort of line. Like I wanted my life to matter, and you took that away from me. But I guess she's sort of also sort of thinking to herself, my life can still matter. I can still go out there and make a difference, but maybe I need Joel in order to do that. So she's torn between like two sort of like conflicting emotions about, is Joel a good person to have in my life, when he's sort of such a compulsive sort of liar. But he's also like the closest thing I have to a father, and I don't want to let go of that because he's been like that father figure to me for such a long time. So yeah, it's a sort of fascinating scene, and the fact that they also have like her finding out the truth in the porch scene, which is not in the game. It's like it makes it even more interesting, like the sort of thoughts that are like playing a sort of wrestling match in Ali's mind.
Right.
It really sort of fascinates me.
One scene that I wanted to talk about with you, because you mentioned it during our last episode, the scene with the spores and Nora, so you mentioned that the second game introduces these airborne spores.
Yes.
And it seemed kind of
they're not introduced in the second game. They're in the first game.
okay
as well.
But so these airborne spores, they are kind of a weird thing to have in a game where you have all of these, infected crawling around or walking around trying to get people. But then you have these airborne spores that, what can you do to defeat these? Avoid them. That's so I thought the way that they incorporated this into that fifth episode, where there's just like a floor of this hospital that they have just like siphoned off, and they're like, nope, nobody's allowed down there. And when Ellie finds out that one of the people in Abby's crew, Nora, is there, by just a interesting circumstance, I suppose, she chases her throughout the hospital, and she ends up on this floor. And then we're introduced to these spores where to me it looked a little silly, but also it was kind of cool to see that, like, Ellie's like, oh, I'm immune, because Nora's like, you just killed us both. And it's like, did I? And that's when Nora figures out, wait, you're her. You're the one that's immune to everything. But this is also where we see Ellie's rage about everything with Joel come to a head, and she is just wailing on this person to try to figure out where Abby is. So, John, your thoughts about that scene, in terms of Ellie's character, in terms of where is Abby, anything that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I like that if you're going to have spores in the show, you do it like this. You put it like in a sort of underground area where nobody else is likely to go anyway. So it does at least make a bit more sense if you're going to have spores that's where they would be, and yet there's still like healthy people out there in the world. I thought actually the way they did the scene was actually quite close to the way it is in the game. The spores look brilliant, like they look like exactly how they look in the game, and it's interesting actually that Ellie's sort of rage, it's kind of like just a culmination of what you've seen from her in the game. Whereas in the show, it kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere a little bit more. You haven't seen as much rage from her in the show, which I'm kind of in two minds as to whether or not I like that or not. Like, maybe it comes out of nowhere because she's been repressing this rage for a long time, or maybe it's just like it just suddenly all comes to a point where like she's just had enough, and she killed Joel. I've got to kill her. Like just that determination just suddenly clicks in her mind. There has been some criticism from fans of the game that like you don't feel Ellie's rage as much in the show, and then you suddenly see it in this scene, because this scene is exactly like it is in the game, right down to that sort of way it's lit with the red lighting in the background. It looks incredible, and I think it really does a good job of like symbolizing Ellie's rage in that scene. I think overall, I do sort of like the fact that Ellie's rage has not been seen as much in the show, because it makes this scene much more impactful. You really get like a kind of feeling of like she's had enough at this point, and she's got to find Abby at this point. This has to be it. And Ellie's immunity being used as like a point of like significance to the WLF, I think it sort of makes me wonder whether or not Abby even realized who Ellie was when she killed Joel, and why the significance of her father dying. And I imagine she probably does, but she's maybe not like put that in her head as like a thought of like significance of like, oh, it's the person that's immune that's now after me. That's maybe like a bit more of a problem. So I'll be interested to see actually if they explore that in the show, because I don't think that's ever brought up in the game. I don't think Abby like ever acknowledges like exactly who Ellie is. Excuse me. Yeah, I thought it was a really well adapted scene overall. It looks exactly how it does in the game.
Nice. I guess this takes us to the end of the season where we finally have an Abby sighting again, where they get some intel that Abby may be at the aquarium, and there's two other people from Abby's crew at the aquarium that they both die. One's pregnant, which that sucks. That's a real bummer that happens. I hear that's in the game.
Yes,
Uh,
that is in the game. It's not quite the same, but it is in the game in a slightly
uh,
different way.
But then Abby comes to confront everybody at the theater because by this time also Jesse and Tommy are in Seattle, and Jesse has found Dina and Ellie and is helping them. And when we finally get back to the theater, Abby shows up and kills Jesse, which again, that fucking sucks. But Abby kind of just like, I don't know, it was interesting, like that whole sequence where Abby doesn't really like she kind of just lets them go.
In this scene or in the scene where she kills Joel?
No, like I'm talking about the theater scene at the very end where oh she
No, it
okay
cuts black.
yeah
It's unresolved, that scene. It's a cliffhanger.
right. So but then that whole sequence gets kind of flipped around because we get, oh, 3 days earlier, this is what Abby was up to, and Abby is about to get summoned to somebody at the WLF. So I'm kind of curious, what did you think of the ending from like a story standpoint and also from a point in the game standpoint? Because I think you and I could both agree it makes sense for them to end at this point because now we can assume at this point that season 3 or The Last of Us season 2 part 2 is going to focus more on Abby as a
Yeah.
character. So I'm kind of curious, what did you think of this final episode, this final sequence with Abby and all of them? And yeah, let's just go with that.
Yeah. So I was thinking even before season 2 started that it was going to end with Abby basically saying, "We let you both live and you wasted it," because that is a big cliffhanger partway through the second game. And it just seemed like a logical point to end the season. And it's interesting the way that they sort of like play it up, like with Ellie kind of almost like thinking that she needs to give up on trying to find Abby. You got Dina and Jesse both saying, we've got to go find Tommy, we've got to go home. And then Ellie just spots the aquarium and she's like, no, that's where she is. I've got to go for it. The scene with the scars on the island is not in the game, which is it's kind of an odd decision that they would add that in, really. I think, again, maybe just setting up the scars ahead of time, even though when I think about the role that the scars play and like where they might have been at that particular point in the timeline, knowing what happens in the game, I'm not pretty sure it kind of makes much sense. And it kind of distracted from the actual like significance of what Ellie was doing at that point, going to find where Abby was. So I'm not sure if I really like that additional scene. Apparently, it was written for the game, and they just decided to cut it out. They just felt like it didn't add anything. So now you're adding it back into the show, even though you've already decided when you made the game that it didn't add anything. So that's odd. But the scene with Owen and Mel, I don't know if they ever mentioned their names in the show, but those are the names of the characters because we're going to meet them later on. That was actually quite an effective way of like setting them up. I thought like the kinds of characters they were and how they're kind of supportive of Abby, but they also kind of like question what she's doing at this particular point. We're going to see a lot more of that, I think, later on, and it kind of like gives you a lot more sort of impact and feels a lot more sort of empathy towards them when they actually die. And I think you're kind of in two minds as to whether or not Ellie like feels any kind of remorse towards them for killing them. Like, there's an interesting change from the game, which is that Ellie doesn't mean to kill Mel. She just gets caught in the crossfire. But in the game, she does definitely like shoot her. But it's only after Mel's been killed that she realizes that she was pregnant. So that gives you a much more kind of like sort of harrowing kind of feel to it, especially since you're playing as Ellie in the game. So you're kind of like, I just killed a pregnant person.
Yeah, I just fucked up pretty bad. And because at this point in the game, also, do you know that Dina's pregnant as well?
Yes. Yes.
Because that should also, if anything, maybe that's something that it should have that much more of an effect also on Ellie as a character, because it's like, I just killed someone that's pregnant. I'm with someone that's pregnant right now. Maybe I need to chill out a little bit.
Yeah, it's a big impactful moment, I think. And there's no like Mel is already dead by the time Ellie discovers that she's pregnant in the game. So there's no moment where she's trying to get her to do a C-section.
Yeah.
So I guess it's maybe trying to make Ellie seem like less brutal and slightly more likable in the show by having her not meaning to kill Mel. But I'm not sure if that really fits with her character from what we've seen, like in the previous scene that we just talked about, with like the rage that she's feeling at this point. You know, she's thinking like, these are Abby's friends, so you know
they're complicit. They're
them to maybe stick it to her a little bit because she obviously just hates Abby at this point. So you know, you'd think maybe she'd want to kill them in a sense. The other like criticism, this was from fans of the game, and I've heard this about criticism of the show, is like, why don't they mention to Ellie that Mel is pregnant? Maybe that should convince her not to kill them. But I don't know. You just don't know what Ellie's going to do at this point. She's like just completely lost it. So maybe her being pregnant might be more of a motivation for her to kill her, because like, oh yeah, I can kill two in one go, or something like that.
maybe. Yeah. John, anything else from this season that you want to talk about that I may have missed?
So I'm already excited for the next season, just with that little like preview scene with Abby at the very end. The WF's location, like in the big stadium, looks exactly how it looks in the game. So I'm really excited to see that and explore more from Abby, and just see more of Caitlin Dever in this role as well, because I think she's going to be really good in this.
Yeah.
Another interesting change actually for the scene in the theater is, I don't think Abby fires the gun in the game. I think she just points it at Ellie and then it cuts to black.
Got it. Okay.
So it's again a more sort of dramatic cliffhanger that you've got there, which I guess is going to be kind of interesting to see, because it's going to be a while before that gets resolved. Actually, we're probably not going to see that until at the earliest the very end of season 3. There may even be a season 4, I think.
And who knows how long it's going to take, because
yeah,
Caitlin Dever is just, she's super busy now. She's got a lot of things going on. Thankfully,
they've not started filming, I don't think, have they?
I'm assuming that they haven't. So unless I don't know, like I am concerned with how long it's going to take for them to get season 3 out. However, I also am kind of in the same boat as you. I am very much looking forward to what happens in season 3, just to explore more of Abby's character, because I feel like we just got like this very one-sided, one note, like all she cares about is revenge. I don't know. I'm just interested in exploring a little bit more of her character, and that's what I'm looking forward to the most.
I was hoping that they might tell this story in chronological order when they adapted it for TV, and I'm a little bit disappointed that they haven't done that, because it would have been nice to like have like a kind of switching back and forth between Ellie and Abby, just like showing what the two of them are up to, because that actually works well for TV. It's kind of a normal thing you see in TV. Here's what one character's up to, here's what another one's up to, like Game of Thrones, prime example of that sort of thing. So the fact that they've decided to tell this more in the kind of order that you see it in the game is it's an interesting decision, because like there's also been like a lot of criticism. It's like this show can't win with the fans of the game. Like some of them are saying it moves too slowly, others are saying it moves too fast. There's some moaning that they've changed things from the game, others are moaning that they haven't changed things from the game. I'm more in the camp of like thinking that they should have changed more. Actually, I would have liked them to have told this more in like the order that things take place, chronological order. The one thing that they do move forward, Abby's backstory as to killing her father, I'm not sure if that actually works. I think it would have had more of an impact if you didn't know that until Joel dies. So they have made some interesting like changes here. I have made a list of a few other changes they made from the game. If I just go through what I haven't talked about yet. Like I think I mentioned, Gail's not in the game at all. She's an entirely new character. Abby is quite a muscular character in the game. Like after her father dies, she like is like enraged and like wants to find Joel, and she's like thinking, I think maybe that the way that she's going to take Joel down is she's basically just going to beat him to death, which I guess she does basically. And so she like works out like in preparation for this. But I understand why they had to change that for the show, because like it's quite a like tight window of or pool of actors or actresses that you could probably find that are actually quite muscular, that would also be able to pull off Abby and be the right kind of age. So I understand why they changed that. It's not like massively integral to her character, but it would have been nice like if they'd added that in. But I understand why they may have had to change that. Ellie leaves Jackson like pretty much after Joel dies in order to go and kill Abby, which again, like kind of an interesting like change of like Ellie thinking about this a bit more logically with the council session, which is not in the game, trying to like get help at least. So again, I understand that change. Oh, and the WLF have dogs in the game that attack you as Ellie, and well, not as Abby because Abby is part of that WLF, but like as Ellie, you're attacked by dogs quite often during the game, and you have to kill them once or twice. So yeah, that's pretty brutal.
Well, that's shitty, but okay.
Yeah. And the dogs have names as well.
Oh,
they definitely toy with your emotions in the game by the kinds of things that they make you do.
Fair enough.
I'm actually quite glad that they did not put that in the show. That would be pretty brutal to watch.
I mean, we still got a couple, like at least 1 or 2 more seasons left to go. Here's a question that I have for you as someone who's played the game and somebody, it's kind of similar to Game of Thrones. When they're done with The Last of Us Part 2, like for on the or like with the TV show, would you be okay with this group of people going beyond that and telling original stuff, or do you think that wouldn't work?
So we like talking about Ellie having more story going forward.
Yeah.
Just based on where Ellie is at the end of the game, I'm not sure that would work, but it'd be kind of interesting to see anyway. So, yeah, I could kind of see where they could go with that if they're not going to make another game of The Last of Us, which I'm actually not sure if that's been confirmed or denied as of yet. And Neil Druckmann, who works on the game, is basically the main guy behind the games. He is working on the show, so it's possible like that they might go the similar route of like making like the story of the third game into the show and then making the game, kind of similar to what they're doing with the Song of Ice and Fire books. Like there's parts of George R.R. Martin's books that he hasn't written yet in Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
So if they do have any more plans with Ellie, I'd be kind of interested to see that, although I'm dancing around spoilers here, but I sort of feel like her story's done at the end of the second game.
Right. Okay. Just something I'm curious about. I was just curious to hear from you. John, anything else that you want to talk about regarding The Last of Us Season 2?
Oh, I think I pretty much I love how it looks.
Oh, yeah.
That's the main thing that comes back for me. It looks just like the game. Everything from like the infected and the environments, it all looks like it's just stepped out of like the gaming environments. And actually, a lot of people that are from Seattle have commented on how well they've recreated Seattle in the game, and I think they did a great job with that in the show. I mean, presumably they filmed this in Seattle. Actually, I
would assume.
So actually, in the show, it wouldn't have been too difficult to do that.
Right. Yeah. So the look of this is outstanding. The production design, and even just the effects, they all look really great. Everything from the music to the atmosphere, everything technically on this show is just brilliant. And I am very much looking forward to what happens here. This is still probably top 3 in terms of video game adaptations for me, because between this, Fallout, and mainly these two.
It's the League of Legends show, I think, is the other one.
Arcane. Yeah, Arcane.
Arcane. Yeah.
So I think The Last of Us is in amazing hands. HBO is going to give them as much length as possible in terms of telling an amazing story. I'm curious to see what's going to happen in season 3, if we're going to just focus exclusively on Abby's story and that's really about it, or are we going to get more stuff with the scars and the WLF?
We are definitely going to get that, yes.
Okay. So yeah, overall, I think I'm looking forward to season 3. I just don't want it to be like multiple years until we get The Last of Us season 3, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I think if you're going to end this season like that, you've got to do the next season like within a year or so.
Yeah,
you can't end it on that kind of cliffhanger and then make people wait.
I mean, HBO does it all the time, so what would be different with that? So, John, thank you very much. Always great to talk to you about TV and specifically The Last of Us, because you're so knowledgeable, and I appreciate the insight from a fan of the game and also just a fan of the show. So thank you very much. It's good to see you as well. It's been a while since we recorded. So John, do you have anything that you'd like to plug, and where can the people find you?
So I'm on Instagram. My username is John Tillyard 86. That's the numbers 86. I'm also on Threads with the same username, I think. I'm on Letterboxd. That is Buck86. Again, the numbers 86. And I also write for SIFPOC. My most recent review was Karate Kid Legends. And my next review after that is going to be 28 Years Later, which I'm actually,
Oh,
at the time of this recording, I'm going to see it tomorrow night.
nice. Nice.
And then after that, it will be Happy Gilmore 2. And I'm also currently working my way through the Conjuring films. I'm going to write a binge review for that for SIFPOC, which I think will be out in about September.
Are you doing all the spin-offs as well, or are
I
you
am
just
indeed. I'm going to do them all.
Oh man, that's a lot of scary movies, and those Conjuring movies, they get you good. So I'll be looking forward to reading up on that. My binge that I've got coming up is I'm doing a Superman binge.
Oh,
So
nice.
so yeah, I'm doing a lot of Superman centric stuff next month because we're recording this in June, and July will be here before we know it. So John, thank you very much. Looking forward to chatting with you again. You and I are going to be talking about a bunch of shows coming up soon. So looking forward to that. That's going to do it for this episode of SPDM TV. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe to anything and everything SPDM Crew, wherever you get your podcast. Join us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and Blue Skies, or Facebook, Instagram, X, Threads, YouTube, and Blue Sky at SPDM Crew. Check out our website at spdmcrew.com. Shout out to HiFlyer Creative Studios for making our awesome logo. Greatly appreciate their support. And if you have any marketing, brand standards, or logo needs, contact them at HiFlyerCreative.com. Check out our other shows on the network. We've got lots of other content available. We've got shows about movies, TV shows. We've got a couple music ones. We've just launched one that is about the readings of J.R.R. Tolkien. And then just check out our other shows. There's a lot of great stuff on here, and we've got more coming up. If you've got a podcast idea or you're interested in being part of the SPDM crew as a guest or collaborating, email us at spdmcrew@gmail.com. Until next time, happy watching, friends.